Okay, so now we're going to get into the evil eye. And to do that, we're going to study a Mishnah in the Tractate of Avot. Please look at page 86, text 5. There are three vices. Rabbi Yeshua said, an evil eye, an evil inclination, and the hatred of one's fellow drives a person from the world. Now, what is he talking about driving a person from the world? So there are different interpretations. One says, and Maimonides is of that opinion, that it can cause the person to die young because they're so obsessed with the evil eye, they're obsessed with the evil inclination, and they can't tolerate people, so therefore they can't survive. Others say that it drives them out of the world. It means that they have to go underground because they can't really remain in a social setting. But being it as it may, whatever it is, there are three vices here. So we're going to really focus on the evil eye because the evil inclination, everybody knows what it is. We were born with it and constantly fight it. And hating people, even if we, God forbid, don't have it, but we know people that do have it. Unfortunately, there are a lot of haters out there. So we know that it's there. So what is the evil eye? So in order to understand the evil eye, we're going to look at another writing. And this is from a rabbi that we quoted in the very beginning when we spoke about dreams. And his name was Rabbi Shimon ben Semach Duran, known as the Rashbatz. What does he say about the evil eye? So look at page 86, text 6. So he says, Maimonides explains that the evil eye means greediness. Being greedy can drive people from this world because the obsessive pursuit of wealth can lead people to place themselves in dangerous circumstances. Let me put this in perspective. Maimonides says that besides the fact that when someone is greedy, they're never satisfied, but when they're greedy, they want to emulate the other people, the Jones or whoever it is. So they know that it's very difficult for them to earn money. So they will do risky endeavors in order for them to be able to make money. They will go mountain climbing to find gold behind the mountain, or they'll go deep sea diving to look for pearls or whatever it is, and they're endangering their life. So they don't understand that the value of life is greater than the value of being equal to someone else. So to him, the evil eye is basically envy and jealousy. And envy and jealousy is prohibited. It's wrong because it shortens your life. So evil eye is envy and jealousy, but nothing more. He's consistent, just like he says about the curse, that the curse can't affect anyone. He says the same thing about the evil eye. It can't affect anyone except the person himself. The Rashbatz doesn't agree with it. He says, actually, the Hebrew doesn't say I disagree with it. The Hebrew says his explanation is not something that I find satisfying. That's the actual word, okay? The Talmudic definition of an evil eye is well known. It refers to looking at a fellow's property with jealousy and hatred, which causes material damage to the person and their property. This has to do with an interesting law that I just want to put it into context because there's a lot of legal stuff. The question is damage from sight, it's a privacy law. You know, when you drive down the highway today and you're driving by neighborhoods, you see the highway department building these walls. Why are they building the walls? Because citizens are saying they have no privacy. This actually originates in the Talmud. The Talmud says if you have two neighbors living right next to each other and one can see into the house of the other person or see the courtyard where they're working, so they can force each other to build a wall to separate so that it blocks the view. And the reason for that is because they'll say, I don't want you to see what I'm doing. It's my private life and it's none of your business. So they have the right to do it. What happens if it's not in a place where you live or even work? You have a big field and you're growing different kind of wheat and stuff like that. So over there, the halacha is also that one can say to the other, I don't want you to see all the beautiful fruits and vegetables that I'm going to grow because it's the evil eye. So according to the Rambam, they only have to build a short fence because there's no damage done. According to other opinions, they have to build a tall fence because there could be damage. So you see that they're both consistent in the same way. And this is what he's talking about over here. Is it that the evil eye is just greediness and it's damaging to the person that sees it? Or is it damaging to the other person? And we have two distinct opinions. Now, to be honest, we are going to override Maimonides a little bit, because I'm going to ask you to look at page 88. We'll take a little bit of time here and give you over some of the practices in Judaism because of evil eye. And if evil eye meant nothing, then why, or it was just bad for the person, why go to that strength? So we don't have time to all of them, but I'll give you some examples. When Joseph was the son of Jacob, right, was sold into slavery by his brothers, and the brothers regretted it. They were eventually the tribes. So they decided to go to Egypt because they had to go buy food, because there was famine in the other lands, and they were living in the land of Canaan. So it says that when they came in, they went in through separate entrances. They were very strong. They were very handsome. They were very powerful. And Jacob said to them, I don't want, one of the opinions why they went through the different doors or gates is, I don't want that there should be an evil eye on you. There's another reason as well, because they wanted to scour the landscape to see if they can find their brother. But this is one of the reasons. In fact, Joseph said, you're spies. Remember in the dialogue between Joseph and his brothers, he accused them of being spies because they went in through different entrances and they were surveying the land. But the truth is that according to this opinion that's brought in Rashi, it was because Jacob was afraid of the evil eye. So we see that the evil eye is ancient even in Judaism. Another thing we find in the time of Jacob, that when he blessed Joseph's sons, he said, you should be like the fish in the sea. Multiply and be like the fish in the sea. So everybody asks, why the fish in the sea? Because it says the fish in the sea are hidden and they cannot suffer from an evil eye. Fish can, only what is public can suffer from an evil eye, which means to say that in the time of Jacob, the evil eye was something that was definitely feared. It was a reality. I'll give you one more example. Do you know how you count in Judaism? Have you ever heard? Not one, not two, not three, not four. Why is that? It comes actually from the Bible, that when God wanted to count the people, he said they should each give a half shekel, and then I'll know how many people there are. Now, God knew, but the idea is you don't want to count, because counting causes an evil eye. Sometimes in the shul, if they want to know if they have a minyan, they'll say not one, not two, not three, or they'll say Hoshea Tamecha, the verse, which is 10, but it's easier to say not one and not two, because of the Ayin Hara. So we see that that's part of it. Another thing is, have you ever heard the term Kain Ayin Hara? Or in Hebrew, Bli Ayin Hara? Okay, where does it come from? Text 7, page 91. The Chidah says, when people commend wisdom, wealth, family of others, they must bless them that they not be affected by the evil eye. And therefore, Kain Ayin Hara is Yiddish and Hebrew. Kain means there should not be an Ayin Hara, there should be an evil eye. Now they say Kan Ayin Hara or something like that, because everything is made into slang. The Sephardim actually say Ben Porat Yosef. I don't know if you heard that, right? And Ben Porat, why do they say Ben Porat Yosef? Because Jacob, when he was blessing his son, Joseph, he made a promise to him that he would always be shielded from the evil eye. And the words that he used was Ben Porat Yosef. It's in the end of Genesis. So again, you see that the evil eye is there. So next time you hear Sephardi Jews say Ben Porat Yosef, you'll know what it is. It's like the Ashkenazi Jews saying Kain Ayin Hara. Okay, so what we're establishing is that majority of Jewish belief is that there can be an effect of an evil eye, or there can be an effect of a curse. But in order to understand how to ward it off, we need to understand what the mechanism is. What are the mechanics of an evil eye? Now, what we learned before from the Rashbats is that the evil eye or the curse is nothing less than a punch in the face. We call it the fist action. You will soon see it. But we have other views as well. And in order to do that, one of the sources for what we have taken a lot of our information from is from a great Kabbalistic scholar that lived in the 18th century. He was from Morocco, and he emigrated to Jerusalem. His synagogue is still there. He's called the Or HaChaim, or many people call him the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, the Holy Or HaChaim. He lived in the time of the Baal Shem Tov. He was a holy man, and he wrote commentary on the Torah. And we're going to learn that a story about curses. And that is that when Balak, or Balak, in Hebrew it's Balak, was frightened by the Israelites traveling through the desert, and he realized that any kind of war effort that he'll do against them will not win, because if the mighty Egyptians lost and the mighty Amalekites lost against the Jews, it wasn't their armies, because they weren't trained in warfare. It was a higher power. And therefore he said, the only way to stop them is stopping them by a curse. So he hired this non-Jewish prophet by the name of Bilam, and he said, I'm going to pay you all gold and silver. You come and curse the Jewish people. And he couldn't get out the curse. And in one place he said, why should I curse them? They are not curseable. And if they're curseable, it's not through me. That was the term that he used. And the Or HaChaim talks about it. So in order to, when we're going to learn the Or HaChaim, I want you to look at the three questions. Number one, think to yourself, what is the underlying philosophical question bothering the Or HaChaim? What is he upset about? And it's going to come out when we read it, but I just want you to think about it. The second thing, how does the Or HaChaim answer this question? And the third is, what is the simplistic explanation for the evil eye curse effect that the Or HaChaim is implicitly rejecting? Okay, so there you have three questions. You actually have it in your student book on page 92. So just remember the questions as we go through this text. Now, this text in Hebrew was written on a very high-class Hebrew. The Or HaChaim wrote it on an amazingly high-class Hebrew, and his writings and commentaries contain pearls of wisdom. He also was a great scholar in Kabbalah, and it's still studied until today. So we have synopsized something that he wrote there, and I'll try to give it a little bit more explanation as we go through. So let's read the text, text 8. The explanation for the effects of the curse is as follows. God has great patience for all transgressors, both the righteous who transgress on occasion and as well the wicked who transgress intentionally. This is operative at all times, aside when God gets indigent. In other words, God can get angry. Not that God is moody, because God is not dependent on circumstances, but there are times that there is the power of anger that God allows to be in the world. And in fact, Bilam, when he was trying to curse the Jews, he was looking for that moment of anger that he should be able to curse the Jewish people. That's what it says. Kael Zom, he was looking for the anger. But it's a very rare thing that God allows the anger to come through. When God's indignation is aroused, he is exacting in judgment and does not extend his characteristic patience. So what we're learning here is like this before we go on. Generally, there are two faculties through which God operates in the world. One is the faculty of judgment, and the other one is the faculty of mercy. We see this in the Midrash right at the beginning of the creation. It's not in the text here, so I just want to elaborate. Anyone knows a little bit about the Bible and a little about the Hebrew knows that God has many names, but the two most famous names are Hashem Elokeinu, or Hashem Elokim. Hashem is spelled Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, which is the infinite name of God. And Elokim is usually translated as the Lord. Elokim is a different name. But Elokim is considered to be the name of justice. When God puts forth the name Elokim, that means that he is sitting on the seat of justice. Like on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, God is sitting on the seat of justice. And when we pray to God, we ask God to please get off the seat of justice, so be it, figuratively, and sit on the seat of compassion. So let me explain. The name Elokim again is justice. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, which is Hashem generally, that is the name of compassion. when the Torah describes the creation right at the beginning, it starts with the words Breshit bara Elokim. Those are the first three words in the Bible. I tell the story many times, but it's always good to repeat. I was driving once in Winston-Salem. This is before I had telephones or anything. I'm talking about the 80s. And I was falling asleep, so I turned on the radio. I was going to a plant to visit for kosher. And the only station that was there was a religious Christian station. And they were giving away a Bible if you can guess the first three words of the Bible. Now, what are the first three of the words of the Bible? So I said right away, Breshit bara Elokim. But they were looking, I didn't call in, but in the beginning is not the first three words of the Bible. The first three words of the Bible are Bereshit bara Elokim. The very first, God created, and the word is Elokim. Only after God introduces Adam and Eve does he use the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. So Rashi brings down from the Midrash and he says that in the beginning, God created the world just with the faculty of justice. But he saw, as soon as he created Adam and Eve, that they have free will and they will not survive if the only way that God relates to them is through justice. Because justice means right is right, wrong is wrong. There's no room for error and there's no forgiveness whatsoever. So therefore, God immediately revealed the name Yud Kei Vav Kei to project into the world, the meaning of compassion. So this is what the Or HaChaim is saying, that the majority of times God operates through the compassion, and therefore he has great patience for all the transgressors, and he doesn't sit in judgment. However, when God gets angry, then he gets off the seat of compassion, so to speak, and he gets in the seat of justice. Now, this is so powerful, the next line, because it shows you the power of words. When people curse their fellows, this causes the cursed party's transgressions to be highlighted, and God doesn't maintain his patience for them. So in other words, when someone curses another person, they're actually getting God to get off the seat of compassion and putting him on the seat of justice. And if the person has a lot of sins, it's highlighted. And then what happens? The curses can take. But if the subject of the curse have no transgressions that make them worthy of punishment, the curse will indeed be completely ineffective. So basically, what is he saying? He's saying, I don't believe in the fist theory. It's not like a curse is causing someone a punch. I believe in, remember I mentioned the two names of God, Hashem Elokim. The Yud Kei Vav Kei is mercy, and this is judgment, and we call this trigger. Now, if you look at the pictures, it's the difference between a parent and a teacher. A teacher has to be merciful too, but a teacher has to be just and fair. When a teacher is marking a test and they think about all of the child, but then they're going to give the child a 90 because teachers have compassion on them, they're not being fair to the child. They have to give the grade exactly what the child deserves. A parent, on the other hand, can be more forgiving. A parent shows more mercy. So when we talk about the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, we're talking about God being like a parent to us. When we talk about the name Elokim, which is judgment, is like Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, God is the judge. So what he says is the following, that when a person curses another person, he triggers the judgment. And by triggering the judgment, all the negativity of this individual that's the recipient of the curse, all of a sudden is highlighted, and then God exacts the punishment on him. So all the evil eye does is it calls attention to the subject and triggers a strict review of their worthiness. So it's not like the fist, because a fist doesn't discriminate. The fist doesn't discriminate between the good guy and the bad guy. This fist hits everybody. But over here he's saying is that it's really up to the recipient, which means to say that if someone is clean of any sin or any faults, the curse is not going to have any effect on them. But if somebody does have faults, they better do tshuva. They better repent and change their life because they're now vulnerable. That's the fascinating thing that he says. So let's go back to the three questions that we asked before. What was the philosophical question bothering the Or HaChaim? The question that was bothering the Or HaChaim is, if a person is worthy of judgment, why does a curse have to bring it out? The person should be judged because God is the judge. He answers that because God usually operates in the framework of compassion and mercy. So therefore, it's only when it's triggered. The other thing that he also wanted to do is the simplistic explanation that the evil eye or a curse is like a fist, that he can't accept. He doesn't have that much power. But he does say that it has the trigger effect. So this is a revolutionary, novel concept, and it also shows the power that a human being has. That the human being, I don't want to use that by God it's the same way, but you ever heard of whistleblowers? So what is a whistleblower? The guy, there's a company doing business and everything, the facade looks nice, everything is fine, but the person inside knows that there's rot. So what do? They don't send a curse on this company. What they do is they just reveal the eyes to whoever needs to see it. And then all of a sudden it becomes an expose in television, or the government gets involved. In the same way, Hashem says, I want to operate that way. I want to turn the blind eye to the faults of my kids. But when someone comes and does a curse, even though it comes from an evil intent, it is almost like a whistleblower. So that's one way of looking at it. So in that way, the way to protect yourself is to lead a clean, ordinary life. And if somebody does something negative to you, it's a wake-up call, even though that person is also going to be punished, as the Rambam writes, for falling so low. But in regards to the victim has things that he has to do. The fist theory has a whole different way of dealing with it. We're going to get to that soon, because that has to do with the red string and all the other stuff. Now we're going to learn one other piece, and that is from the Zohar. You know what the Zohar is? The Zohar is one of the earliest books on Kabbalah. The Zohar comes along and doesn't speak about the attribute of mercy or the attribute of judgment, but the Zohar speaks about something else entirely. The Zohar talks about that this world, before we look inside, I just want to paint the picture for you. This physical world that we live in replicates the spiritual world, the godly world. Just like in our world, you have the dry land, so to speak, which is open and public. You also have what's concealed in the oceans. In fact, the ocean life is much bigger than what's on dry land, and it's probably even more spectacular. The only thing that's hidden from eye, unless you go deep sea diving. Okay? So in the Kabbalistic vernacular, the revealed is very limited and finite. The concealed is very infinite. And what the Zohar is saying is it depends what kind of life a person lives. Does a person live a revealed life? We're not talking about transparency. We're talking about yenta. You ever heard yenta? You know what a yenta means? Someone that just shares information with everything. We're going to have a little video about that as well, which is, I think, very clever, made for our times. So if someone is ostentatious and shows off and flaunts, so then they're judged in a certain way. But if someone is more concealed, then they live in another way. It's the difference between living a public life or living a quiet life. Let's give a look in the text itself, even though it's written in Aramaic. We'll read it in English. Text number 9, page 94. So he says, God operates on two levels, concealed and revealed. The revealed level is that of worldly justice, while the concealed level is the source from which all blessings emerge. As a result, all of a person's conduct that is concealed is saturated with blessing. All of a person's conduct that is in the open is subject to strict justice. On this level, everything is subject to the evil eye. So we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but he's just introducing the concept here, but it parallels a little bit of what the Or HaChaim says, that when one lives concealed, so then they are able to reach into the power of the infinite, which is the power of the divine mercy. And over there, God overlooks them because they're not ostentatious and he forgives them. But if everything they do is in the public, then they have to be reckoned in the public. So the Zohar says the way to protect yourself from a curse or the way to protect yourself from an evil eye is by living a more concealed life and not an ostentatious life. Why is it that the infinite is able to do that? So there's several reasons. One reason is God makes the decision, and God can do whatever you want. But then there's another thing as well. I remember as a child, we were learning a discourse from the third Chabad Rebbe, and he quoted something that it says in the Gemara, that sometimes in the king's chamber, you can find a spider web. Have you ever heard that term? Probably you have to fire the janitorial crew. But the question is, why would it be that in a king's chamber can you find a spider web? And the answer is because when you're in the king's room, you're dealing with such lofty matters that you don't have time to look at the little nitty-gritty stuff if there's a spider web behind the curtain or something like that, because you're talking about major things that affect everything in the country, the destiny of the country, the policies of the country. So when a person goes into the king's room, they're not examining the room. I remember by the Rebbe, it was like that. If you would ask someone to describe what the Rebbe's room looked like, most Hasidim that they went in wouldn't be able to describe it because they were so focused going into the Rebbe and they were, with reverence, that it was only after the Rebbe passed away, they went, oh, this is what the room looks like. By a king, when you walk in, you don't see these things. So in a sense, when you're dealing with the infinity of God, the little things could sometimes be overlooked. Not that God doesn't know of it. God knows everything and he wants everything to be right. But he's seeing the bigger picture and he forgives you. So that's where the mercy comes from. But when someone is living an ostentatious life and a petty life and everything that they want to brag about and show off, then, okay, then it's causing God's scrutiny. So there's a parallel between the two. But the reason that we have both is to show that both of these opinions reject the fist theory and they accept the trigger theory. So we have two theories, the fist theory and the trigger theory. So now the question is, if we accept the trigger theory, then we know what the solution is. Live a clean life, a private life, and it'll be fine. But if you accept the fist theory, how do you protect yourself? So we're going to go through some things. Number one, there's no question that the mitzvah that one does is the best thing. Being involved in mitzvah, we're still going to see some answers as well. And that works both for the trigger theory and for the fist theory. I'm going to ask you to look at page 96 because this is where the tantalizing, exciting stuff comes up. Okay, I'm going to introduce you to a few of the things here. So these are called evil eye protective methods. There are a number of popular methods of protection against the evil eye used in Jewish circles. Some of these methods have foundations in Jewish sources. Others are questionable folk customs. So let's look at the first thing. The first thing is called the Hamsa. Now, the Hamsa, I would say straightforward, is mostly found in North African or Sephardic communities. As you see what it says, the palm-shaped Hamsa, it's in Hebrew, they spell it Hamsa. Hamsa is Aramaic for the word Chamisha, which means 5. And there are 5 attributes of kindness. And that is represented in the 5 fingers that you see in the Hamsa. And if you look at the picture of the Hamsa closely, you will see that in the palm, there's the letter Hey, right? You see the letter Hey? And the letter Hey is the equivalent, is the numerical value of 5. So again, it's that. And the word Hamsa means 5, referring to the 5 fingers of the symbol, and the word itself is also said to ward off the evil eye. A number of Jewish sources associate the number 5 with the protection against the evil eye, leading some later authorities to use this as a support for the popular practice of saying Hamsa and using the Hamsa symbol. So when you go to Judaic bookstores in Sephardic neighborhoods, or you go to Israel, you will see Hamsa sold everywhere. You go into a taxi in Israel, in today's time, an Uber or a Get, you will see the Hamsa hanging from the mirror. It's not just a good luck charm. To them, it is more than that. It's warding off the evil eye. Yes, Marvin. That is to represent that it's, oh, yes, what you're saying is true, that sometimes you see with an eye, and the idea of the eye is that it takes control over the evil eye. It's the same theory that the Billy Goat Sanius did, that by prancing with the goat in Wrigley Field, he thought that this goat is going to undo the curse of the previous goat, whatever. So that's where symbolism comes. And we have some various scholars that say it. Now, the red string is much more controversial. There is some, yes. Obviously, according to the people that have it, they believe that it has the power to ward off an evil eye. Otherwise, they wouldn't wear it. Like what?
Is there a source for it that it has?
So we just read the source for it, and you give a look further. He brings down from the Chidah and from the Odios of Chai. I'm not going to quote all of them because a lot of it is left for your own reading, but there are sources to that. The red string is a little bit more controversial. Where does the red string come from? So there's different sources. One source says the red string comes that God allowed that there should be a red string tied around by the tomb of Rachel, and it's a sign of protection. There's a very big debate in the Talmud about this. What is the source of the red string? Some people say that it's Kabbalistic. It's very hard to find it in Kabbalah. You find it in earlier writings, not in Kabbalah. There is actually a Tosefta that says that it was a pagan custom to wear a red string around a finger. If it's a good luck charm, it's definitely a good luck charm for the people that sell it, because they sell a piece of thread that's worth 5 cents for a whole bunch of shekels. So they definitely profit from it. But to say that it actually wards off evil eye, I'm sorry to say that most opinions in Judaism say that it has no meaning whatsoever. Yes, Chevy. No, that's called Darkei Amori. That I said it's a pagan custom. Is the same thing as Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah is there are some people. I read a letter that somebody wrote to the Rebbe about it, and the Rebbe said that there are different opinions, but one should be careful because there are those that hold that it's the pagan ways. So it's still a choice of people. I don't pull it off from people, but I have never bought a red string, that I can tell you. Then there's another thing. If you look at the next page, they're called amulets. This was also a very big production. It wasn't a business because rabbis didn't charge for it. They had rabbis that were scribes that would write a special amulet on a parchment, and they would have people wear it to ward off evil eye. Now, some people wear a mezuzah around their neck. The Rambam is furious against it because he said, don't take a holy mitzvah and make it into a lucky charm. But having a mezuzah on your door is a mitzvah. But I will say, several times, people that were very sick in the hospital had sent a message to the Rebbe saying to the Rebbe that they want to have some extra segula. The Rebbe said they should have a tzedakah box to give tzedakah. And then he said it would be good to have a mezuzah wrapped in a double wrap in the night table next to where they are because of the holiness of the mezuzah next to them, but not as a lucky charm. The only thing that the Rebbe ever introduced, but not as a lucky charm, but something that women that are going into labor should have, and also when the baby is born should have, is these Shiramalot cards, which has the a psalm of protection. It's Psalm 121. And there were several reasons for it. It's a prayer. And the second thing is that the Rebbe was very strongly of the opinion that babies are affected by what they see from the moment they're born. And therefore, if you surround them with holy words, it inspires them with holiness. And so for that reason, it's become a custom that they have these Shira Malot cards. They have it in the hospital. They have it with the baby for the first few months. Anyways, so here you have the history of that. So the Chamsa is very, very popular in the Sephardic community. The red string is also popular, but it's become even more popular by the pseudo students of Kabbalah that went to Israel, and they came back with all these new ideas, and they would wear the red string or the red thread, and it became a whole big thing. And if you go on Wikipedia to see the red thread, even in Hebrew, it's called, you know what it's called in Hebrew? Chut Hashani. Shani is also red. Chut Shani, that's where the origin is. And it's very, very popular. So that is a protection against those that think that there is a fist there. Now, someone wrote to the Rebbe and said that they're very worried about the evil eye and they don't know what to do. So let's look in text 10, page 98. The Rebbe writes, if your mezuzahs are kosher, and most importantly, your daily conduct is in accordance with Torah law, it is absolutely impossible for the evil eye to have an effect on you. This goes according to what the Or HaChaim said before, that if your life conforms to what God wants, the evil eye has no effect on you. On the most basic level, firmly resolving to align your daily conduct with the guidance of our living Torah, and to observe the mitzvahs which we are told, you will live with them in God's command. In addition, this is the path to receiving God's blessing and everything you need. So there's two things here. Number one, it wards off evil eye. You have nothing to worry about. And not only that, it increases the blessing. There were many times that people would write to the Rebbe, and the first thing that Rebbe would say, check your mezuzahs. Are your mezuzahs kosher? I was just watching a video from Dr. David Laz that in the 70s, when he got engaged, he and his bride went into the Rebbe for a blessing, and he took his father-in-law along who had some sort of neurological issue, and he was tested several times, and they determined that it was MS. But before he went in, the Rebbe wrote to him that he should check his mezuzahs. The problem was he didn't have any mezuzahs. So he went and bought mezuzahs, and he bought tefillin. When he came to the Rebbe, they had a whole discussion in medical terms. And then the Rebbe looked at him, and 3 times he said, I don't believe you have MS. And you should go get diagnosed again. But he didn't want to go get diagnosed again because those days the diagnosis was through an injection in the spine with dye. And then they developed a brand new test that wasn't as invasive, but it had 99.9% accuracy. And it was only done in some of the southern hospitals, believe it or not, maybe in Texas or Georgia. And he went down and he actually had the test. And he called his son-in-law and daughter and he says, guess what? I don't have MS. And they were able to discover what else it was. So the son-in-law felt that it was the mezuzahs that did it. But there's no question that why a mezuzah? So on a mezuzah, there is a shin on the outside of the mezuzah, right? If you buy a mezuzah, you see a shin. What does the shin stand for? One of God's names. God has 7 names that are holy names, that these names that are determined that they're holy, that you're not allowed to erase them. For instance, when a scribe is writing a Torah and he makes a mistake, what does he do? He takes a razor blade, scrapes off the ink, and rewrites the word correctly. But what happens if he writes one of God's names, one of the 7 names of God, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Elokim, or El, like we mentioned before, or Shaddai? He's not permitted to erase it because God's names cannot be erased. So then he has to put the whole piece away. That's one of the reasons why Torah is written in sections. Could you imagine the guy is working a whole year and he comes to the very last column and all of a sudden he makes a mistake in God's name, can't use it. So we know that this is a holy name, Shaddai. And we see in the book of Exodus that when God was talking to Moses, he said, I revealed myself to the ancestors with the name Shaddai. So why is the name Shaddai, the Shin, the one name that's chosen on the outside? It's not inside. It doesn't appear inside. Inside of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, the word Shaddai doesn't come in. So the Zohar says that the Hebrew word Shaddai is a 3-letter word. Shin Daled Yud. Shin Daled Yud. And one of the reasons that they give is that Shin Daled Yud is an acronym for the words Shomer Daltot Yisrael, the guardian of the doors of Israel. In other words, that the mezuzah has a protective quality built into it, that it gives a protection to the dwellers of the home, whether they're in the home or out of the home. It has that protective quality. Now, I have to say what it says. I'm not saying that it's guaranteed protection against everything, but it's like a helmet. A helmet minimizes damage that can be done. But when it comes to evil eye, the Rebbe writes with certainty that having a kosher mezuzah definitely protects you. Okay? So according to all interpretations, go back to that one. According to all interpretations, increasing in Torah mitzvahs increases our protection from evil eye. Everybody holds that. So, you know, there's the joke about the mezuzah, about the religious Canadian skier that was going downslope skiing for a test for Olympics, and he was the fastest in the group. But when it came to the actual, they put 20 gates. And when he started to ski, everybody else won him, and he was the slowest. So when he finished, his coach said, "What happened?" He says, "Who was the wise guy to put a mezuzah on every gate?" Because he was stopping to kiss you. That's the joke that they say. Why? Because when you go through, it's not so much the kissing the mezuzah, it's recognizing. It gives you an identity of God. So when you have God on your side, it protects you from the evil eye. Now we're going to get to one more thing, which this goes back to what the Zohar said, and that's the idea of privacy. This piece that we're going to learn now is so relevant to today's times. And in fact, the video that they put together actually shows it in a beautiful way. And I hope nobody is offended, but I'm a fan of this video, as you will soon see. So, going back to the story of Bilam, when he was hired by Balak, he couldn't curse the Jews, and he came out with this fascinating statement. He came out with this fascinating statement. What was the fascinating statement? Let's give a look. Text 11 on page 99. When Bilam raised his eyes and saw Israel dwelling according to his tribes, the Spirit of God rested upon him, and he proclaimed in his message, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. It's a verse that we recite every day in the morning service. How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling place is Israel. Now, what was so special? This picture doesn't do justice because it was symmetrical. There were lots of tents. They were living in the desert. But he saw something. He saw that the people respected each other's privacy. Nobody's door or window was opposite their neighbor's door or window. So when you looked out from your door or window, you saw a solid wall. But you didn't see the peeking voyeuristically, what's going on? Is that person cooking dinner? What's that person doing? How they're treating their child? There was modesty and privacy. And when Bilam saw that, he said, this is unbeatable. And as Rabbi Shlomo Ephraim of Lunchitz, known as the Kli Yakar, writes in text 12, Bilam proclaimed, how goodly are your tents, O Jacob, because he saw that the entrances of their tents were not aligned opposite each other, so that no one would be able to see into their fellow's tent and harm them with an evil eye. Balaam said to himself, I cannot curse them with an evil eye because this is something they are so particular about themselves. In other words, that they are taking protections to shelter themselves from the evil eye. The evil eye cannot affect people that live privately in their tents and don't flaunt it publicly. So that is the meaning.
Do you have someone in your pocket? I bet you do. That usually refers to having strong influence over someone. But I'm referring to something else. With social media, we have many people in our pockets, at least digitally. With devices small enough to carry wherever we go, we communicate instantly. Kids update their parents, relatives pay remote visits. We support, nurture, issue an advisory, forward a shopping tip, ask for ideas, join a conversation, make someone's day, or just say hi. With social media, we can admire a new arrival, celebrate success, offer inspiration, and invite endless friends into our private vacation. We can even join a dinner without consuming a carb. So yes, social media delivers your social world into your pocket and delivers you into other people's pockets. But like all things stored in pockets, it's easy to get carried away. When we think we are connecting with those we care about, we can actually be negatively affecting some of them. That's because each person has their own successes and failures, good times and bad. You might be feeling on top of the world, but someone else is at the bottom. You might feel like you've made it, while someone in your audience feels like they'll never. Think about it. You move into your dream home and want to share your excitement. But how might that make someone struggling to keep their cramped quarters feel? You capture a hilarious video of your boisterous brood and are itching to share the joy. How might someone desperate for just one react internally to that? Your perfect relationship pose has been captured digitally. You're proud to post. How might that be taken by someone whose self-image has been worn down to the bone by a difficult relationship? The ideal vacation includes posting manicured images of its highlights. What might that do to the emotions of someone who dares not hope? You're in dazzling attire. Why not reap some online admiration? What might that mean to someone struggling with their body image? So, is there anything wrong with sharing proud, cute, and memorable moments? Not at all. But here's a dose of wisdom that might help strike a balance. You see, modesty has traditionally been a trademark Jewish value, and its basic ideas run something like this. Not everything has to be shared. Privacy makes an experience more meaningful, not less. Not everything shared publicly has to be shared completely. Consider whether what you share will arouse jealousy. Estimate in advance how individuals might react internally to what you display or disclose. Will they feel delighted or dismayed, enlightened or depressed, inspired or deflated? Put yourself in their sandals for a moment. So, before sharing your next slice of your life, you might want to ask yourself, am I sharing an important update or am I flaunting? Will this make people genuinely happy for me? Or will it invite jealousy and resentment? How many images or posts of this do I really need to upload? Is it realistic or a heavily manicured impression of reality? So it turns out that having people in your pockets is not enough. We've got to have them in mind too.
Okay, so I don't have to give any commentary on it. The question then is, how do I incorporate? And then I want to get to the bottom line of this whole thing. We have to think about how we can incorporate, and I think everything is in balance when we talk about it. I personally am not on Facebook or Instagram or any of the other stuff, so I don't feel the temptation, and I can't watch the temptation. Thank God for that. But I know others are very taken by that, and we have to think about it. This is something that we have to think about, the flaunting. So flaunting definitely attracts. I remember a story that was told by my mother to me, that my sister, when she was 2 years old, it was the night of Passover, and she looked very pretty, and my mother had a very pretty dress, and she was just, dazzled by herself as a 2-year-old. And there was a guest from overseas, and he was fixated with my sister, and he was like, how beautiful she is, how beautiful she is. And within 20 minutes, my sister turned red, blue, started to vomit, and they had to rush her to the doctor, whatever it is. And my mother was convinced, she's from Ukraine, near Russia, that it was an evil eye. So there is something there that we have to think about. But let's talk about something positive, because we want to finish with something positive. Words do have power. There's something that they don't have here, which I don't know why, but before we go to the positive, there's an entry from the Rebbe in a book, Hayom Yom, that in the city of Mezibush, which is in Poland, the synagogue of the Baal Shem Tov, there was a morning service. And before the service, there were two merchants that were competitors, and they got into this verbal fight. And they got so angry at each other that one said, I'm going to rip you up like a fish. And the Baal Shem Tov turned white. And he took his students, made a circle, and he put his arms around them. They all made a circle, and he started to sing a song, told them to close their eyes. And all of a sudden, they actually saw the man take the other person and rip him into pieces, shredding him. They were horrified. And he said that words have power. But if the words have power in negative, they have power in the positive as well. So rather than just thinking about the evil eye and how to ward off an evil eye, let's think about the positive. How can we effectuate a positive blessing on another person? So look, page 102, text 14. This is taken from the Talmud. Rabbi Elazar said, in the name of Rabbi Hanina, never consider the blessing of an ordinary person unimportant. We know of two people, leaders in their respective generations, who received blessings from ordinary people, and their blessings were fulfilled, David and Daniel. David was blessed by Arnava, as it is written in Arnava said to the king, may your God favor you. And Daniel was blessed by Darius, as it's written, your God whom you continually serve will deliver you. I will explain it, and then we'll stop for a moment for a few questions. Who's this Arnava? Arnava was a man that owned today would be very profitable real estate. He owned what was eventually the Temple Mount. And when David was looking for a place to build the Holy Temple, he found that mountain and he said, this is the proper place to have God's house. And Arnava was a Jebusite. Jebusite in Hebrew is a Yevusi, and he wasn't Jewish. But most of the Jebusites did not want to sell anything to David, but when he came to him, they struck up a conversation and he paid cash for it. That's why we say about the Temple Mount, it's one of the several places in Israel that Jews did not conquer. They paid cash for it, just like the Marat HaMachpelah, the tomb of the patriarchs, and this is one of the other places. In any case, this Arnava was very, very nice to David, and there was a plague or a pandemic that was affecting the Jewish people in Israel, especially near Jerusalem. By that time, 70,000 people had perished. And when Arnava gave the blessing, and he said, may your God favor you, at that moment, the plague stopped. So the Talmud attributes it to the blessing. The power of a simple person giving a blessing to another person is so strong that you can't even imagine the effect. The second was Daniel. What was the story with Daniel? The story with Daniel was, I have a few minutes so I can explain it. It's a very simple story. The destruction of the first temple happened by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. But before Nebuchadnezzar conquered Israel and destroyed it, he only conquered Israel a little bit. And he decided to take the young and the brightest out of Israel and bring them to his kingdom so that he can build his own Silicon Valley. And one of the brightest men was Daniel. There was also Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And the book of Daniel is written in Aramaic, and it starts that he gave them names, Babylonian names. And then the chef came to complain that they're not eating because they only eat kosher food. So the king allowed that they should have a kosher diet, which was vegetarian, specially made for them. But then after Nebuchadnezzar died, there was the king Darius, who was a very kind king, but the king's advisors were very jealous because Daniel, because he was so bright, was promoted to be the chief advisor to the king. And the king didn't make a move without him. So any strategy that they had to strategize in the kingdom, they would go to Daniel. Daniel was very big in the kingdom. So they decided a plot. They came to the king and they said to the king, we so hold you in high esteem that we want that there should be an edict issued that from now on, no one can pray to their gods. They can only pray to you. And they have to realize that you're the one that provides the sustenance. You're the one that provides them life, and they have to pray to you. And not only that, anyone that's caught praying to someone else than you shall be thrown into lions' den and put to death. And they knew that Daniel is not going to stop praying. And not only that, from the book of Daniel, we know from that he would pray 3 times a day, and also that he prayed to Jerusalem. And not only that, Daniel lived on a second story, so everybody can see him from the main street. He had his window open so he can face Jerusalem, and 3 times a day he would pray and pray to Hashem. on the way to Jerusalem. Well, the king's advisors were overjoyed. Now, they didn't have videos in those days or smartphones to videotape it, but they had enough testimony. And they came to the king and said, Daniel is violating your law. He's praying to the God of Israel, and you have to follow the law. The king was heartbroken because the king realized this was a ploy to get rid of Daniel, and he didn't want to get rid of Daniel. But he knew that he has no choice because he could be dethroned if he doesn't follow his own law. So for that reason, he said, okay. And he was so upset. So before Daniel was taken to the lion's den, he said to him in Aramaic, the God that you pray to and serve, let him be the one that will deliver you or redeem you from this problem. And guess what happened? Daniel was thrown into the lion's den with hungry lions, and they sat tamely around him as if they were a kumsitz at a campfire, and they didn't harm him. And that's when everybody saw that he had gone on his side. But the Talmud attributes it to the blessing. So here we see two opposites. We see on the one hand, the harm that an evil eye can do, and the harm that a curse can do, but we can also see the blessing that it can do. We're going to go on a little further, but I want to stop for a second. In fact, in the Pirkei Avos, it says that one of the sages said that the worst attribute that one can have is an evil eye, and the best attribute one can have is a good eye. And there's a story that's told that the previous Rebbe said when he was a small child, he had a friend and they were young, and his mother gave him some harbuz. Harbuz is watermelon. And he thought his friend got more than him, and he was upset that his friend was eating it all and he had very little. He came to complain to his father. And his father said, you have two eyes. One eye is to see the other person negatively, and one eye is to see the person positively. And you have to use the good eye, only see the person positively, and don't use the eye that sees the person negatively, okay? So we see in the same way that when you look at someone with a good eye, you can be very beneficial to them, or when you say a blessing to them. But when you say a negative, it can have an effect. So I'm going to stop a second because we only have two more readings. But before we go on, I've been doing the monologue here. I only had one or two comments. Any questions or thoughts so far, or any myths destroyed, or any questions about the myths? Brad, and then you.
The host of the evil eye the evil eye first that somebody puts to somebody, or is it God or judgment?
So let me repeat the question. You always thought that the evil eye is a cosmic force, and that's the question that I was waiting for. It depends if you accept the fist theory or the trigger theory, because you just answered it with your question. If you think it's the fist theory, so then the belief in Judaism is that there is a power of fire and electricity and sparks, or what we call today energy, that a person can generate when they look with their eye or when they speak words. So even though it's invisible, just like energy is invisible, but it's there. And the person has the power to create that negative energy. And for that reason, it is so powerful that you need a shield to protect yourself. And the shield is the Hamsa or the red string or whatever they use. But it means to say that words are not just powerful, but words have an energy of their own that can be very destructive. But that's why words also can be very, very powerful. What was your question?
But you had mentioned before you do see from time to time that you'll see effect on people now, like very fashionable things, or people wear just the evil eye. It seems that like then you're wearing the curse, right? Is that?
So let me repeat the question for the benefit of those people that can't hear you. We spoke about before that in the Chamsa, most of the time there's a hey, but sometimes there's an eye. And if someone is just wearing an eye, is that the evil eye? The answer actually is that it's not meant to be the evil eye. It's meant to be the good eye. Because remember, we said that there's the good eye and there's the evil eye. there is this concept of God's watchful eyes upon us. Now, there is a little bit of a problem with that, and that's why it's not so common. It says that you're not permitted to engrave an image of God or any part of God on anything. So you can't, because God is not definable, describable. So the psalmist in Tehillim asked the question, the creator of sight or the creator of eyes doesn't have vision. So when you say God's eyes, it's not the physical eyes. God doesn't have a physical body. You can't attach any kind of corporal body to God. But eyes is the power of vision. But the power of vision is not just the power of vision that we have, that we can see. Vision is light. Vision means you can absorb things. Vision means you can interact with it without even touching it. And God is the ultimate of that. So when we say the eye of God, we're saying the eye of God should be upon us to watch us. I'll give you an example. When Moses was speaking about the virtues of the land of Israel, persuading the people before they crossed the Jordan to go in Israel, so he was speaking about the mountains, and he was speaking about the fruits, he was speaking about all the and the springs, he was speaking about all the virtues, and then he said, to top it off, it's a land that the eyes of God are upon it from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. The gaze of God is upon it, or it actually says the eyes of God are upon it. But he was saying it as a positive way. God's eyes are everywhere, but I want to give you a little example. A human being has life, and life is felt in every organ of the body. But which organ of the body is the most sensitive to life? Which is the organ of the body that feels everything? It's the neurons, it's the brain. So for that reason, according to Kabbalah, the center of the soul is actually in the brain. The inclinations are in the heart, but the center of the soul is in the brain. And from the brain, just like the neurons spread from the brain and they give you the sensitivity and they give you the feeling and it controls everything in the body, similarly in the world, Israel, and more specifically Jerusalem, and more specifically the Holy Temple, is the brain of the rest of the world. In other words, it's the dwelling place of the divine. And that's the meaning that the eyes of God are in it. So it's not the physical eyes, but it means that there is this kind gaze of compassion and love that comes from God to the people. So therefore they wear that eye, not thinking that it's the evil eye, but it's to ward off the evil eye by countering it with a positive eye. Yes.
But then what's the Logan Day, the Star Day?
It had to do with what?
Sharp points, like women can sit behind a triangular table to ward off the evil eye.
It's actually two triangles.
That was good.
It's brought down in the sources that a Magen David was used as. The Magen David actually means the shield of David. The shield of David was different because most shields that people wore didn't necessarily have points, and if they did, it had 5. The shield of David had 6 points, and it was a unique shield that he fashioned, and that's why it's called his shield. But he wore it in battle. But spiritually, they said that the Star of David was also something to ward off the evil eye, and that's why there are a lot of people that wear, not just to identify with Israel or the Jewish people, they wear a Star of David because they think that there are a lot of things. It's not the only thing, by the way. I mentioned before about the counting, not 1, not 2, not 3. There are people that walk certain ways, certain steps. There are people that walk certain blocks. They do things to ward off the evil eye. There's all kinds of superstitions that are out there. And the just to the point is that we're learning here is that the evil eye does have power. The curse does have power. However, we're not afraid of it if we are living a good life. And we're also not afraid of it if we have mezuzahs. But if someone really needs, they can actually apply some of this. The Rebbe also writes, having a tzedakah pushka, I mentioned that earlier, is also a way to ward off the evil eye. But the Magen David is another one. There was another one that you spit. I don't know if you ever heard of that. Yeah?
People do it during
They do it during what? That's for a different reason. The spitting is another one, but don't do it in a New York subway station because it says a sign, do not spit or no spitting. The spitting has many reasons. One reason is that the evil eye, if it comes from jealousy, and when you spit, you're degrading yourself. So then it wards off the evil eye. Some people have a custom of spitting 3 times. Some people have a way of using their fingers, and they go to the person that suffers from the evil eye, and they pinch them on their lips. And there's all. I have a book that has a list of all the Jewish ways of warding off an evil eye. So there's plenty over there, and I'm sure you've heard many, many, many more of that. Yes, Marvin.
So at the beginning of class, statement that first, even a devil.
Correct.
And I started thinking about it, and I actually wondered if instead of being also saying even a deaf person is not cursed.
No, that's not what it said. It said you shouldn't curse even a deaf person. But
Is there something perhaps with that person, but they curse?
why should they? No, they're obligated with the same obligations. But the verse would not really have the powerful impact if you're talking about a deaf person cursing or not. The idea is that why does it say a deaf person? Because it could even if the person doesn't hear it, it could be powerful against them. Or as the Rambam says, the one that does the curse, they themselves are cursed. So we'll find there's an interesting thing, and I don't know why I didn't mention it, and I think I, by mistake, skipped it. Oh, it's actually in the appendix. I apologize because I know I saw it. I'm going to ask you to look at page 110 for a minute and 111. On 110, text 20, it says, all who are particular in their concern about harm from demons, the demons are particular with them. And people who are not particular, they're not particular with them. And a very famous sage that moved to the United States in the previous century, he was known as one of the greatest deciders of Jewish law, by the name of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, wrote in his famous book, Igrot Moshe, and that's page 111, one should, in regards to the evil eye, one should certainly be careful about the evil eye, but one shouldn't be overly concerned about it because the general rule about such matters is that people that are not particular, the evil forces are not particular with them. I had a story with my father one time that I mentioned this once, he had a foot infection and somebody thought it was the evil eye. And my mother and grandmother were begging him to go to the revered Rabbi Dworkin, who was the rabbi of the neighborhood, and that he should ward off the evil eye. And my father was very friendly with him. And he spoke on the phone to him. And the first question he asked my father is, do you believe in the evil eye and its effects? And my father said, no. He said, then I'm not going to be able to ward it off because it's not an evil eye. It's just a medical condition. That's it. But nevertheless, we have to understand that if we put ourselves in the mindset that we're afraid of the evil eye, then it could have an effect on us. If we are oblivious to it or we're impervious, then we're impervious to it. And that's strengthening ourselves with the mezuzah and all the other stuff. I want to finish with one statement. Oh, two, because we were speaking about a good eye. Go back to page 103. We're actually done. Text 15. When you look at your fellows with a good eye, remember there's the good eye, you give them blessings, and you also receive blessings yourself. The verse states a person who has a generous eye will be blessed. The Hebrew word is tov ayin hu yivorach. And yivorach can either be yivorach, which means will be blessed, or yivorech, and he will bless. So that's number one. Then, if you give a look on page 106, text 16, the previous Rebbe said the following: the Baal Shem Tov taught that a blessing given by a close friend is more influential in heaven and more likely to achieve its desired effect than the angel Michael's intercessions and pleas for mercy. Angel Michael is known as Malach Machol. He's a angel that is always there to speak positively about the people in the world. And that's why on Yom Kippur, by Ne'ilah, we call out his name, Malach Mechol, please intercede for us. So Malach Mechol is known as that angel that he always comes with the blessings and he always comes with kindness. And here the Baal Shem Tov says that a close friend looking nicely and favorably at another person and giving them a blessing is even more powerful than that angel, because the blessing has tremendous power. If you look back on page 104, those are readings for yourself. It gives you many examples from different sources about the Torah. So I want to read one, because I remember when it happened. I was actually in Charlotte and I missed that Fabring, and it was Simchas Torah. And it's on efficacy. Down on the bottom, it quotes the Rebbe, and it says the following: when people bless each other with success in both the spiritual and material realms, it expresses their love for one another, it demonstrates Jewish unity, and increases the flow of God's blessings. In the end of the Amidah, we say, bless us, our Father, all as one, with the light of your countenance. When we are all together, all of us as one, then we are considered worthy of receiving God's blessing. So unity, having a good attitude towards another person, is what's most effective.
Lesson 3.
Sorry, we don't need that. I just want to say that next week we are going to be studying about ghosts, demons, and angels, and the Dibuk. And we're going to open it up to other people so you can get a taste of it. And one of the things that I want to connect it is with Shavuot, because the Talmud talks about a great dialogue that happened between Moses and the angels on the mountain when God wanted to give the Torah. So I think they left the dessert for the last, but thank you very much. Yes. Mazel tov, that's what I was waiting for. So last week we talked about astrology and we talked about the mazel, that sometimes they would say, give birth at a time when it's auspicious. But there's another meaning of mazel tov, and I ask you all to hear me for a moment. The Torah says that the Talmud actually says that there is the part of the soul that hovers above us, that it is so powerful and infinite that it can actually not be enclosed in the body. And that part of the soul guides us in everything, and it's called the mazel. And the story is, and it's connected to the ghosts, that the same Daniel and Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were walking through a street, an abandoned street in Babylonia, and they walked into a dilapidated house. And all of a sudden, Daniel saw a demon, and he ran out. The others didn't see it, but they also ran out. So the Talmud says the prophet who saw it saw the demon. Why didn't they see? Why did they run out if they didn't see it? So it says, even though they didn't see it, their mazel saw it. So the mazel is the flow of the higher level of the soul. So that's the other thing about mazel tov. And that is that when you say mazel tov, we're asking that the infinite part of the soul should flow into you, radiate into you. It should be able to give you all of the blessings that come from the place of mercy. And that is actually the truer meaning of mazel tov. Thanks for remembering. Thank you. We will see you next week.